Hello folks, we are on Bible study lesson 4, video 4. We left off at the chapter called Propagation. Here we go. I left them to see where that shitty bird took the other babies. Not to my surprise, that shitty bird took them back to the sienna tree that was in the middle of the Barukuhashi Sea. I called a swarm of toads to attack the roots of the tree. Of course, there was a huge fish called Kara. It ate the toads. There was a righteous ass. It had 1 golden horn, 3 legs, 6 eyes, and 9 mouths. Jahi brought to me a creature as I stood on the bank of the sea. It came from one of her daughters who fucked in Ahura. It was an Azi, a dragon. Its heels were golden. I fed it, and it quickly grew huge. I named it Gandharva, and left it to terrorize the righteous ass and the shitty bird. While the Gandharva was harassing the righteous ass, 3 Ahura watchers stood over the shitty bird. The shitty bird nursed the babies till the watchers could take over. The same ones as before: Spenta Armaiti, Kastravara, and Amaratat. Spenta Armaiti taught animal sacrifice. Kashiratha Verya taught shelter. And Amaratat taught tools. Homerzad's most trusted, Ashma Spentas, archangels. So in other words, what you're seeing here is the beginnings of the right-hand path, teaching animal sacrifice, teaching men how to build shelter, and teaching how to use tools to build these shelters. So instead of using natural things like caves or anything like this to build shelter, but exterior shelters, tools, and obviously with tools it's going to be weapons and so forth. It's self-evident. 2 types of men developed over time. The ones taught by Ashma Spentas, the ones taught by the angels, and the ones taught by the Archdevas, aka the demons. The righteous Ashavans and the wicked Durvans were the 2 types of men. So a person who follows the right-hand path would be called an Ashavan. People who follow the left-hand path would be known as Durvans. Those born with a blessing were known as Magi and Yatus. So for example, a priest, a wise man, and so forth on the right-hand path would be a Magi. I mean, it's not difficult. Think back to the birth of Jesus, the 3 Magi, blah, blah, blah. There was a Zoroastrian priest, blah, blah, blah. There you go. Yatus is obviously the title given for someone who practices black magic, i.e. sorcery, according to Zoroastrianism. These were wise men and sorcerers. These people were able to communicate with the spiritual entities. They are the ones who melded reality through the power of the Spirit. A man propagated the 7 lands. Chaos broke loose. Ahoras and Devas were fucking the daughters of Jahi. Divs, Ahis, magical birds were created. The Divs were headed up by Devi Spenta, or the white demon. Devs were demonic that were hairy and ape-like. They called them giants, and since they were abominations, they attacked everything. And normally they're described as walking backward, talking backward, they're doing everything backward. Specifically, Devi Spenta, the white one, has the ability, like if you were to take a piece of flash paper and burn it, it blinds you momentarily, which can trip you up if you're moving or doing something. And he's real good at blinding the mind's eye. That's why basically he became the leader of that particular band of demon. Dragons attacked men and beasts of burden. The magic birds were fickle, never knew which way to go, order or chaos. The Divs would fuck or rape women and create other creatures, heroic men. These people were fickle because they had free will to choose sides. The pious remained righteous and the sinister remained wicked. War broke out amongst all. Heroes killed Devs, Azis, and magic birds. This made heroes kings and leaders of men. As these kings gained power and control, chaos slowed down. Then a king, Yima Kasheta, was able to attain the favor of the water by Ardiv Sira Anahita. Adil Sira Anahita is the personification, or the good personification of water. Whereas Jahi or Je is the evil female personification of water. You have both of those. Sometimes they're seen as the same and one turned evil, sometimes they're seen as two separate. But to make things easier, we'll just say that we got two separate. This is the evil side for water and the good side for water. The divine glory. And Mithra also gave Yima altar, the divine glory, the sacred flame of Hormuzad. This was the altar flame that had made the sacrifice to Hormuzad. In other words, you'll see in the Zoroastrian temples, you'll see a big old fire pot. You see it a lot in Hinduism as well, where they have these big old fire pots of the eternal flame, reflecting that of the universal energy that burns in everybody. I believe they call it prana in Hinduism. And it's a representation of that spiritual fire. Another king rose to power as well, called Zahak. The two kings ruled over their lands and had some control over all creatures, creating chaos. Then Yima offered two of his daughters to Zahak to maintain peace between the two kingdoms. They were accepted by Zahak and couldn't have this. Order was winning. Plans had to be executed. I called forth Melek Taus. He was charged with killing Amaratet and taking on his form. Then ascend into the house of song and bring back to me the keys and the zodiac. Jahi was charged with creating more divs and azas to start more chaos and seduce Ahura against men over jealousy of women. It was my job to clear up Zahak. At the time, humans in Zahak's kingdom, vegetables and sorts was the only food they ate. So I weaseled my way into becoming a king's cook. The king enjoyed the food so much he visited me. I took him aside and offered him the best meal he ever had, but afterwards we would embrace as lovers. Zahak agreed to my offer. So I ordered all types of animal meats and milks. I cooked the meats and made soma from the milk. I used their vegetables as garnishments on the plates. Zahak became intoxicated on the soma and truly enjoyed the new flavors of the meats and the sauces. All those presents were also intoxicated. After dinner was finished, I approached Zahak and took him back into his bedchamber where we could be alone. As we were in the bedchamber, I reminded him of our deal. I shared the pleasure of man-on-man consubsistence with him, finally corrupting this righteous king enough to bless him. As he climaxed, I kissed him on both shoulders. He fell asleep, and I disappeared into the night, not to be found again. Zahak woke up the next day with swords on his shoulders and an asshole. It wasn't long before the serpents grew out of his shoulders. The king and his advisors were baffled, and people were sent to find me. Zahak cut the serpents off, but they just grew back. Taking on the identity of a physician, I swore I could help him. Eventually they brought him to me so I could finish the job. I plucked the snakes out of his shoulders and kissed the wounds. The wounds seemed to heal up. Zahak returned to his palace. Later that night, the scars on his shoulders tore back open. He screamed in pain and a bright, brilliant light was ejected forth from his body out of his mouth. It shot up into the sky and then exploded. The first traditional exorcism, where the righteous guardian was ripped out of his body, then his body was filled with drudge and serpents grew from his shoulders. So what you're seeing is, he came to the physician, Ahriman then blessed him again by kissing the wounds once again. This expelled the holy guardian, Holy Ghost. Like what we say in this religion, when we do the traditional exorcism, we're pulling out the Holy Spirit or the holy guardian that a person has within them. Because it is our thinking that once a person consciously decides good versus evil, and you'll have one or the other inside. Majority of people have the good inside, so that's got to be ripped out. And this is an example of that ripping occurring so that he could create an evil Dervant. And that light came out and exploded. And with that magical occurrence, in order to maintain immortality, his body was turned, the insides were turned into drudge, or turned into demons. So his internal body is now demons, and this is how he maintains his immortality. This is also known as Azi Dahaka for all those who haven't been able to keep up. Zahak was reborn as Azi Dahaka, three-headed dragon king. This creature required the brains of two young men in order to sustain itself. In other words, each snakehead had to have a young man's brain. After Azi Dahaka's army began to dwindle, it was time to conquer yet again. Since there were only two kingdoms, guess where he locked onto? King Ymir was about to go to war but didn't know it. My son, the Black Demon, was sent to watch King Ymir. He explained to me that King Ymir had been blessed by Mithra with Atar, the divine glory. Again, this fire, this altar fire. Somehow King Yima was able to attain the favor of Ardvi Sira Anahita, again the spirit of water. Somehow this asshole gathered the power of both fire and water. This needs to be corrected if Azidahaka is to defeat King Yima. I had the Black Demon explain how King Yima was expanding the landmass to accommodate all the new creatures. It was explained to me that the damn bull was sacrificed. Then King Yima had a golden rod that he would mix in the sacrifice. Then some ceremony was used along with Hormuzad's essence to create more land. It was quite frustrating to solve this issue. The Black Demon was given his orders. He was to pollute the Atar at the next ceremony. He was to whisper to King Yima to tell him lies about it, to keep the pollution hidden. Azidahaka needed to get the water spirit's favor. Let's give it a sacrifice it couldn't refuse. Without water and fire, King Yima could be destroyed. Unbeknownst to me, King Yima's arrogance is what did him in. I do believe my son helped, but since King Yima performed the third ceremony, he asked for Mithra's throne. Then had the balls to commit evil speech by saying he was the creator and he had no need for a priest. Atar took form of a bird and flew off. The Black Demon chased it back to the Varukasha Sea, to the shitty bird. In the meantime, Azidahaka's assault was quite successful after all abandoned King Yima. I did enjoy then how Azidahaka sawed the arrogant excuse of a pious man in half. It did become obvious to me that if these pious asses have success with magical workings, they become quite arrogant. Vanity becomes one weapon we can use to manipulate these fools. So in other words, now you're starting to see a development of learning how to manipulate human beings into being evil and doing evil things, even though they're thinking that they're good. Azidahaka became the ruler of the lands and still required his daily brain food. After 15 generations of King Yima, Hormuzad had his new hero, Feryudin, who was both a warrior and a physician. He learned how to heal all types of wounds caused by the serpent. Upon his mission, the Druids influenced a dream of omen for Azidahaka. The first thing Feryudin had to do was to attain the favor of the water spirit. Unto Adavi Sara Arahita, Feryudin sacrificed 100 male horses, 1,000 oxes, 10,000 lambs. Feryudin also argued over 2 wives granted to Azidahaka, Shanaraz and Anaraz. They were gifts for peace. After time, the water spirit agreed to his terms. Feryudin was only half strong because he was without Atar, who was still held up with the shitty bird. Azidahaka had put an order out to kill all of Feryudin's family and to capture his mother. While Feryudin was preparing, he went into hiding within the ridges of the Mount Alvarez. Feryudin had a spear covered with Yima's royal banner and a mace made into the likeness of a bull. This mace was imbued with the magical essence of the Club of 1,000 Knots. I grow tired of Mithra's constant interference. In other words, you're constantly seeing the good gods interfering by giving them weapons, banners, or other things that would supposedly weaken the evil. Once the mother of Feryudin was captured, she was tortured till fear mounted. As planned, she ran to her son. With the Black Demon right behind her, the Black Demon returned to Azidahaka with the location. A unit was mounted and advanced into a hidey hole. No stone would be left unturned. Somehow, Feryudin was able to avoid the unit and get into Azidahaka's palace. In the courtyard, Azidahaka was eating his daily meal. Unknown to him, they had been feeding him cow brains to weaken him. This was also done to move people away from the kingdom, and this is where the confrontation began. Okay. Feryudin got the drop on Azidahaka, stabbed him in the side with a spear. Azidahaka bled snakes, scorpions, and poisonous toads. Feryudin scrambled to club all the Druids that poured forth from Azidahaka. Then that shitty blue flew over with old Hormuzad not far behind him. I'll be damned before I let that fucker interfere again. I assumed the form of the greatest dragon ever seen by the eyes of men. Using the power of the endless darkness, I blotted out the light. This distracted Azidahaka and Feryudin. Was able to strike a blow to Azidahaka and knock him out cold. I was busy creating darkness, and that fucking Feryudin was able to tie him down and drag Azidahaka off. The frost of winter would soon cover this earth. The shitty bird brought Attar to Feriadun. This was how they were able to navigate back to Yuma's palace. The two parts of Yuma became the twins known as Caltes and Caltopates. These twins were quite busy. The palace was on top of one of the highest mountains, and they were burrowing into the mount to create some kind of huge storage basement. At the bottom was an uncovered well. Feriadun got Azidahaka to the palace, and the three fought with their lives to get him into the well. They threw him down into the well because they knew Azidahaka was immortal. There was no other way to control my demigod. The great moved over the well, sealing him deeply inside the mountain. Azidahaka will rule again. It's only a matter of time. As Azidahaka fell into the pit, Melek Taus lit up my darkness, falling from the house of song. He brought back 1/3 of the Aharas to include the 12 zodiac, the Varak, Torah, Dupatkar, Karach, Sher, Kushak, Terazuhuk, Gazadum, Nimasp, Bahik, Dul, Mahik. The other 28 subdivisions fell with the original 12. The Devas quickly helped Melek Taus to gather up these Ahoras and drag them into Erizera. Then they got pinned up in their proper places.